welcome to Simpler Bible, a daily journey to biblical understanding. For episode 98, we are coming to the end of the reign of Solomon. After King Saul and after King David, the rest of the kings don't have a whole lot of time spent on them, normally just a couple of chapters. Solomon had 10, 11, 12 chapters spent on him between two different books, but just not a lot going on because we're going to accelerate really quickly through the rest of the kings and get into the prophets and the Babylonian captivity. But today we're going to be in 1 Kings 10 and 11. Parallel text would be 2 Chronicles 9. So 1 Kings chapter 10, beginning in verse 1, says, "Now when the Queen of Sheba heard the fame of Solomon concerning the name of the Lord, she came to test him with hard questions. She came to Jerusalem with a very great retinue, with camels bearing spices and very much gold and precious stones. And when she came to Solomon, she told him all that was in her mind. Solomon answered all of her questions. There was nothing hidden from the king that he could not explain to her." And that just kind of goes to show like how sharp Solomon is. We know that he's smart. We know that God has given him wisdom. And so Solomon here, remember when it talked about how he was able to talk about everything. He was able to know everything. He's very intelligent. And so he's giving her, he wrote over 3,000 proverbs and over 1,000 songs. And so like he knows about all this stuff. So she comes seeking his counsel, just listening to him. And it says this in verse 4, "When the Queen of Sheba had seen all the wisdom of Solomon, the house that he had built, the food of his table, the seatings of his officials, the attendance of his servants, their clothing, his cupbearers, his burnt offerings that he offered at the house of the Lord, there was no more breath in her." Now, I want to point this out because it says the house that he built and then the house of the Lord. We know that he began that in the second month of his 4th year. We noted that he finished the temple in the 8th month of his 11th year. And we know that he was going to take another 13 to 14 years to finish his house, his palace. And so we'll add another 13 to that and call that the 24th year of his reign. And so she's coming to him after he's done all of that. He's only going to reign for a total of 40 years. And so this is towards the end of that. We don't know when in the end of that, but it's at least past the halfway point, okay? She said to the king, "The report was true that I heard in my own land of your words and of your wisdom, but I did not believe the reports until I came and my own eyes have seen it. Behold, the half was not told me. Your wisdom and prosperity surpass even the report I had heard." So this just shows you how well off he is, how rich he is, how smart he is, how much wisdom. Because she said, "I heard the report of you in my own land and I didn't believe it." She goes, "I thought people were exaggerating." And she goes, "And then I come here and I meet you and I see everything you're doing. And I realize that the truth is even better than the stories I was told, that like not even half of your grandeur was told me." So she said, "Your wisdom and your prosperity surpass all the stories that I had previously heard." She says in verse 8, "Happy are your men, happy are your servants, who continually stand before you and hear your wisdom. Blessed be the Lord your God, who has delighted in you to set you on the throne of Israel. Because the Lord loved Israel forever, he has made you to be king, that you may execute justice and righteousness." And she gave the king 120 talents of gold. A talent in the Bible is 75 pounds. This should make you think of the New Testament when it talks about Jesus says, "I'm going to go away," king or a wise man went away to receive a kingdom for himself. Before he left, he gave men talents, some 10, some 5, some 2. And what we tend to do is go, "Oh yeah, all of us have talents." Guys, it's not about your hobbies. It's not about your interests. It is a weight of treasure or a weight of something. So they were given 75 pounds of something or 750 pounds of something. It was some sort of money. It's not a skill that you have. So we got to quit reading talent in the Bible as a skill you have. So one talent is 75 pounds. She gave him what equated to 9,000 pounds of gold. and a very great quantity of spices and precious stones. Never again came such an abundance of spices as all these that the Queen of Sheba gave to Solomon. Moreover, the fleet of Hiram, which brought gold from Ophir, brought from Ophir a very great amount of algum wood and precious stones. And the king made of the algum wood supports for the house of the Lord, for the king's house, also lyres and harps for the singers. No such wood has come or been seen to this day. And King Solomon gave to the Queen of Sheba all that she desired, whatever she asked, besides that was what was given to her by the bounty of King Solomon. So she turned and went back to her own land and her servants. Now the weight of gold that came to Solomon in 1 year was 666 talents of gold, or 49,950 pounds of gold. Some of you are going to lock in on 666 talents of gold and go, oh my goodness, mark of the beast, whatever. Spoilers, because we're not going to be in Revelation until the very end of the year, so I'll go ahead and tell you now. The number that we get, 666 in Revelation, as the mark of the beast, the oldest manuscripts in the Bible have that number as 616, not 666. So there is disagreement in Revelation about whether that number should be 666 or whether it should be 616. Either way, this is talking about gold and not the mark of the beast, so don't freak out. Besides that which came from all the explorers, from all the businesses of the merchants, from all the kings of the west and the governors of the land, King Solomon made 200 large shields of beaten gold. 600 shekels of gold went into each shield, and he made 300 shields of beaten gold. 3 minas of gold went into each shield, and the king put them in the house of the forest of Lebanon. The king also made a great ivory throne, overlaid it with the finest gold. The throne had 6 steps, and at the back of the throne was a calf's head, and on either side of the seat were armrests and 2 lions standing beside the armrest, while there were 12 lions that stood there, one on the end of each of the 6 steps, and the like of this throne was never made again in any kingdom. All King Solomon's drinking vessels were of gold, and all the vessels of the house of the forest of Lebanon were of pure gold. None were of silver. Why? Silver was not considered as anything in the days of Solomon. They have so much gold that silver is not even considered valuable. I would have been like, I would like to be able to go and be like, just give me all your silver, Solomon. I know you don't want it. I'll take good care of it for you. And he's just throwing silver out, right? Like, what's this silver garbage that we have? For the king had a fleet of ships of Tarshish at sea with the fleet of Hiram, and once every 3 years the fleet of ships used to come bringing gold, silver, ivory, apes, and peacocks. Some will say baboons, and the reason for that discrepancy between peacocks and baboons is because in the Hebrew the implication is a colorful butt. And so some default to peacocks with their colorful tails, and some default to baboons. And so the implication, the idea in the Hebrew was a colorful behind. And so I don't know. At any rate, it's peacocks or baboons. Thus King Solomon excelled all the kings of the earth in riches and wisdom, and the whole earth sought the presence of Solomon to hear his wisdom, which God had put into his mind. Every one of them brought his present, articles of silver, of gold, garments, myrrh, spices, horses, and mules, so much year by year. Solomon gathered together chariots and horsemen. He had 1,400 chariots, 12,000 horsemen, whom he stationed in the chariot cities with the king in Jerusalem. And the king made silver as common in Jerusalem as stone, and made cedar as plentiful as the sycamore. And Solomon imported horses from Egypt and Kue, which were specifically forbidden back in Deuteronomy 17. And the king's traders received them from Kue at a price. By the way, the conditions of Deuteronomy 17 were do not go and don't get horses from Egypt, don't get horses from Kue. One of the other conditions of Deuteronomy 17 for when the people would finally have a king is that he shouldn't accumulate wealth for himself, which Solomon did. And the other condition was that he shouldn't accumulate wives for himself, which also Solomon did. So look at chapter 11, and it says, now King Solomon loved many foreign women along with the daughter of Pharaoh. Remember, very first thing we learned about him is that he made an alliance with the king of Egypt by marrying his daughter. He married the Moabite women and Amorite women, Edomite, Sidonite, and Hittite women from the nations concerning which the Lord had said to the people, you shall not enter into marriage with them, neither they with you, for surely they will turn away your hearts after other gods. Solomon clung to these in love. So Solomon married not just the daughter of Pharaoh, but he married these other women too, Moabite, Ammonite, Edomite, Sidonian, and Hittite women, of whom God had forbidden them to intermarry. And he said they'll turn your heart after other gods. And it says Solomon clung to them in love. He had 700 wives. I mean, my goodness, that's a bit excessive. Princesses and 300 concubines. So he joins himself probably not to 700 other nations. Don't think of it like that. But he's probably going, to the Hittites and being like, hey, what daughters do you have? I'll marry all your daughters. But this guy accumulated for himself basically what amounts to 1,000 wives. And it says this, his wives turned his heart away from God. For when Solomon was old, his wives turned away his heart after other gods. His heart was not wholly true to the Lord his God, as was the heart of David his father. For Solomon went after the Astoreth, the goddess of the Sidonians, and after Milcom, the abomination of the Ammonites. Solomon did what was evil in the sight of the Lord and did not wholly follow the Lord as David his father had done. Now, did David sin? Yes. But did David engage in idolatry? Never. And Solomon does. So after Solomon has built a temple for the Lord, after he's built himself a house, what does it say? Verse 7, Solomon built a high place for Chemosh, the abomination of the Moabites, and for Molech, the abomination of the Ammonites. Now, you might not know this yet, but the god called Molech, all right? Molech, one of the chief ways that you worshiped Molech was child sacrifice. And so, see, I'm trying to talk and spell at the same time, and it never goes well. So his wives are worshiping these gods. He builds them high places and temples for their gods. One of those gods being Molech, and Molech requires child sacrifice. That would have been happening in the days of Solomon. He has turned away from the Lord. Look where he builds it. He builds it on the mountains east of Jerusalem. And so he did for all of his foreign wives who made offerings and sacrifice to their gods. So he built these two. These are mentioned by name, but he also does this for all of the rest of his wives. And the Lord was angry with Solomon because his heart had turned away from the Lord, the God of Israel, who appeared to him twice, which we've looked at both of those. And he commanded him concerning the thing that he should not go after other gods, but he did not keep what the Lord had commanded. You might remember that God had said to him that if you're faithful to do what I say and you don't turn after other gods, then I'll bless you. And Solomon, of course, didn't heed that, but neither did the people of Israel prior to that. The Lord therefore said to Solomon, since this has been your practice and you have not kept my covenant, I will surely tear the kingdom from you and I will give it to your servant. Yet for the sake of David your father, I will not do it in your days, but I will tear it out of the hand of your son. However, I will not tear the kingdom away from you completely, but I will give one tribe to your son for the sake of David, my servant, for the sake of Jerusalem that I have chosen. So for the sake of David, we're going to see that a couple of places. And the Lord raised up adversaries against Solomon. Hadad the Edomite, he was of the royal house in Edom. For when David was in Edom, and Joab the commander of the army went up to bury the slain, he struck down every male in Edom. So David in his lifetime had all the men of Edom struck down, and now this guy's been harboring a grudge against David, and he's seeing some weakness in Solomon that he's going to take advantage of. And then if you come down, verse 26, and it says this, Jeroboam the son of Nebat, an Ephraimite of Zered, a servant of Solomon, whose mother's name was Zerah, a widow, also lifted his hand up against the king. We've seen one other mention of Jeroboam previous to this, but it's just in passing. So this was the reason why he lifted up his hand against King Solomon. Solomon built the Millo and closed up the breach of the city of David his father. The man Jeroboam was very capable, and when Solomon saw that the young man was industrious, he gave him charge over all the forced labor of the house of Joseph. So Solomon puts him in charge of all the forced labor. Do you remember the 150,000 people who were working in the temple and working over the house of Solomon? Jeroboam's kind of in charge of all that. At that time, when he's in charge of all that, Jeroboam went out from Jerusalem, and the prophet Ahijah found him on the road. Now Ahijah had dressed himself in a new garment, and the two of them alone were in the open country. Ahijah took hold of his garment and tore it into 12 pieces. And he said to Jeroboam, take for yourself 10 pieces, for thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, I am about to tear the kingdom away from the hand of Solomon, and I will give you 10 tribes, but he will have one tribe for the sake of my servant David, and for the sake of Jerusalem, the city I have chosen out of all the tribes, because they have forsaken me and worshipped the Astoreth, the god of the Sidonians, Chemosh, the god of Moab, and Milcom, the god of the Ammonites. So they're idolaters now, right? And so this is what happens. Jeroboam is not looking to be an enemy of Solomon. He works for Solomon. And Ahijah comes out and takes his coat and rips it into 12 pieces, says, pick 10. And Jeroboam picks up 10. He goes, congratulations, you're going to get 10 tribes of Israel, and God's going to put you as ruler over it because Solomon and all those guys have rejected me. And he says, they have not walked in my ways, doing what is right in my sight and keeping my statutes and my rules as David his father did. Nevertheless, I will not take the whole kingdom out of his hand, but I will make him ruler all the days of his life for the sake of David, my servant, whom I've chosen to keep my commandments. But I will take the kingdom out of his son's hand and give it to you, to 10 tribes. Yet to his son I will give one tribe, that David, my servant, will always have a lamp before me in Jerusalem where I put my name. And I will take you, Jeroboam, and you will reign over all that your soul desires, and you will be king over Israel. And If you will listen to all that I command you and walk in my ways and do what is right in my eyes, keeping my statutes and my commandments, I will be with you and build you a sure house, and I will give Israel to you. Guess what Jeroboam is going to do? Not obey God. Anyway, Solomon, because of this, Solomon sought to kill Jeroboam. So Jeroboam's out in the field one day working for Solomon. Ahijah the prophet comes up to him, says, hey, when Solomon dies, you're going to get 10 portions of the 12 portions of Israel. It's going to be yours. Somehow this gets back to Solomon. Solomon seeks to kill Jeroboam, so Jeroboam flees, and Jeroboam, now God has raised him up also to be an enemy of Solomon. And so it says this, now the rest of the acts of Solomon and all that he did and all of his wisdom, are they not written in the book of the acts of Solomon? And the time that Solomon reigned over Jerusalem was 40 years, and Solomon slept with his fathers and was buried in the city of David his father, and Rehoboam his son reigned in his place. Now, we are going tomorrow into the Psalms. We will not we're not going to go through 150 Psalms. It's just too much time, and I'm going to spend about a third of the year in the New Testament because I think we need to. And so tomorrow, join me in the Psalms. We're going to cover some of the Psalms of David, and then some of the other Psalms of Asaph and Korah that are written, some of the ones that we didn't hit already. And we'll go through the Psalms for about 3.5 weeks. But tomorrow, if you want to join us and read ahead, read Psalm 1 and Psalm 2. Where we're leaving off today is Solomon has died, Solomon has rejected the Lord, and God is about to strip the kingdom from him. I'll remind you of that when we come back to the Kings after we've dealt with Psalms, and then the 3 books that are attributed to Solomon: Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Song of Songs. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Thank you so much for journeying with us today at Simpler Bible through another section of Scripture where we come to know and understand God a little bit better. Look, if you're brand new to Simpler Bible, we have all sorts of resources available for you. Go to our website, simplerbible.com, and there you can find these videos, you can find our podcast, you can find links to our social media, and you can even find a blog post with additional scriptures if you want to go into a little bit more study than we had time to cover in this podcast and video today. We hope that this tool will be exactly that for you, a tool. Not something that replaces your daily walk with God, but something that enhances your daily walk with God and helps you to know and enjoy Him more. Thank you so much for being part of this, and we'll see you again tomorrow.